the first time I had some special effects that were in Firecracker, but not a terrible lot. Um, but the first time that I was working with any kind of effects makeup was when I was doing Watch Out, and I had not known or even thought about how to incorporate allotting the time for it. Like really like planning for it. So it was a little bit of a nightmare. And the person that I was working with was great, but she and I just didn't have a conversation about what it really takes to pull off some things. Like, for instance, there were a few shots in it where this, among other things, there's quite a few number of special effects in the film, but there was this one moment where this girl is getting her toes cut off. And that's not an easy thing to do. It doesn't, it's not something that you can just do in 5 or 10 minutes, and I didn't realize what the complexity of it would take until we were in the middle of trying to do it. So of course we were behind schedule, and me, I'm on schedule or ahead of schedule every day. So the fact that you've just lost 3 hours was significant, and like, oh my God, what are we going to do? But I remember that, of course, by the time that we were finally working together, I had known that experience in the past. So I could say, hey, realistically, tell me, how long will this take? And then we worked together, and it worked out, and everything was great. And I still think we should talk for a few more minutes before I have you start, just in case anybody else wants to join. But and I'm recording this also, so we'll have a record of it, and people can share it later and experience it later. So when we did Helltown, what I found also most interesting about working with special effects in general is, to the naked eye, what it looks like versus what is on film. It's like sometimes like there would be this situation where we're trying to create a certain effect, and it's really hard to tell when you're just sitting there with the device. Let's say it's when the guy has his the wire on the neck, right, in the car, and there's like this whole contraption. I mean, it's not easy. It's like this whole thing, and there's like the spurting of this, and then there's this, and all this other stuff. Trying to frame it correctly, and then also like figure out how to do it is very complicated. But what I loved about it was when you see it, like, because you're a filmmaker, you already know what it will look like, right? And so that was amazing, just to see it come together, and to see the fact that it all not only worked but like looked totally real, which is crazy. Tell me a little bit about, okay, so when did you do exposure?
We did exposure, started pre-production on that uh, late 2015. It was like right after Helltown. We did
Okay.
we did Helltown, and I think Helltown had just come out, but I know that we shot it in 2016. So we actually went and did an Airbnb cabin, and for 2.5 weeks, something like that. So I think it was like 17 days or something like that. I co-wrote it. And you'd mentioned being a filmmaker and also being a makeup effects artist, and the advantages of that is that I know what the effect, what we need for the effect to work on film, because I am already thinking about how it could potentially be edited at the end. Again, it's always kind of a sleight of hand. You're basically pulling off magician's tricks. But yeah, so 2016, we shot there in late September. And then we did some additional photography that next spring, and then premiered it in Boston, Massachusetts at Scaricon, the beginning of the summer of 2017. So
When did Showtime pick it up?
Showtime picked it up. The legacy of that was it was kind of like a whirlwind, and I know that you've probably experienced that too, where you're just like, "Whoa, shit! What's happening? What? How did this happen?" So yeah, we were just like, "Oh yeah, man, we made this." The whole goal was just to make a very slow burn horror film that had a lot of elements of stuff we love from the '80s. So it's very Cronenberg, very John Carpenter, and we showed it at Scarecon. Well, at Scarecon, there was another film being shown there by a guy named Dylan Reynolds, and Dylan Reynolds was also happened to be a sales agent. He saw exposure, really liked it, and we had good conversations. And he had said, when you get back home, give me a call. Maybe we can see if we can get what we can do with this. Maybe we get it out there. So we did, or I pushed the other producers, like, we got to talk to him. We got to get the ball rolling on this, because the iron was hot. It's time to get going on it. So we communicated with him, and within a week and a half, he called back and said, just got a call from Showtime. They want my film, and they want a package deal. They want 2 films, and would you want to jump on board with exposure for this 2-year contract with Showtime? And I was like, yeah, of course. You never be like, woo, yes, whatever. Like, all right, well, let me talk to the other producers. We all agreed, so we got it on there pretty much just serendipitously. It was just like this serendipitous thing. And I will go back a little bit. When we were going around with Helltown, we showed it at a convention or a horror movie convention in Colorado, and that's where I met Lynn Lowry. We all hung out and everything like that. Got along with Lynn really well, and that was because of our connection to Debbie Rashawn, who was in Helltown. Helped us out there. So Lynn really wanted to work with me because we had such a good rapport there. So she came on and did a little cameo for us, and then she also championed the crap out of it. It seemed like every convention we went to, Lynn just happened to be a guest there, so she would talk about it and everything like that. So really, it was just a kind of a combination of serendipitous elements that just led to that sale to Showtime. And then it also opened us up because it was just a contract for cable. So we could put it on whatever streaming services want. We reached out to a small company that really does some really great releases of their lower budget horror films called Scream Team, and reached out to them. They really wanted to put it out on Blu-ray for us. So they created a really, it's like really badass package for us. And so it's out in circulation. And also because of the elements of the film being kind of a throwback to the 70s, 80s, they also did a limited run of VHS tapes for us. So
oh, cool! I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's in full frame too, just like the old, no widescreen. It looks like, you'd run it 100 times and it was kind of faded and stuff. So it was really kind of a neat package for us. But so that's just kind of led to that, which then, kind of got my name out there much more. And kind of the finalization of that was right before I started working on I Am Lisa. And then our latest collaboration, we went and had it one more time, showed it at Crimson Screen, which Helltown had done very well at 2 years prior, and wound up getting the Best Makeup Effects Award for exposure while I was there. So
amazing.
Kind of a nice top, cherry on top for that whole run of that project. So
very cool. Well, okay. I think what I'll have you do is just start, and I'm gonna I'm just for the sake of the recording, I'm gonna say today we have special makeup effects artist Jake Jackson to tell us what we all should know as filmmakers, producers, and directors if we're ever considering working with special effects, makeup, or the things that we need to know before it's too late. And you can tell us stories about when it was too late, when you realized that no one knew this, nobody was taking it seriously, and all that stuff. But I'm going to give you the floor, and I'm going to mute myself and turn my video off, but I'm still here. So if there's anybody that comes in or any other questions or anything that pops in, I'm right by. I'm just going to let you take it over from here. So
sounds good. This is Jake Jackson doing this little lecture on how to work with special effects makeup artists in the independent film world. I have some talking points here that I'll bring up on my screen so I can kind of follow along with what I want to cover today. One of the things that became apparent to me, I started doing short films and stuff like that way back in 1995, and dabbled in special effects makeup because I had to, because I like monster movies and I wanted to make monster films, horror films and such. So I had to kind of learn the craft. I worked in the off and on, worked on all kinds of different projects, worked on a few things during the early 2000s, went to the Art Institute of Chicago to learn a little bit of film there. So I've got kind of a background in art cinema. But around 2008, after my youngest children were born, which were a set of twins, I had to kind of reevaluate my time and started to refocus on special effects makeup as a new area of focus in the industry, due to the fact that I couldn't be running around all over the countryside with a camera and a bunch of people trying to shoot short films, trying to work on bigger feature-length films and whatnot. So I refocused on just the special effects around 2008. And due to that, I found that I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the process. I really enjoyed getting my hands dirty and building molds and sculpting and creating effects and creating prosthetics. And then around about 2012, I started getting into local theater and doing makeup for that. Ultimately, I came on board the project Helltown that Steve directed as a makeup effects artist. And I've known Steve at that point, like for 15 years. We've known each other since 1999. So I came on, worked on that, and that just kind of springboarded forward in terms of me working as a makeup effects artist in the industry. And I also started getting back into the producing aspect of it, as well as writing and directing. But as I went along, one thing that I seriously noticed was that there is a disparity, a discrepancy, I guess there is, in terms of how producers and directors approach movies and projects that they're working on or getting ready to make that have special effects makeup. A lot of it is that there's this notion, and it's very prevalent in theater, that we just show up with our brushes and magically make this stuff happen, which is not the case. There's a lot of work in pre-production for us to get prepared for what we have to do on set. So when it comes down to it, the biggest part is communication up front. One of the things that everybody's going to ask themselves is, what do I need to look for in a makeup effects artist moving forward? Well, first of all, take a look at your production and see what elements in there do have or potentially could have effects, because any good makeup artist is going to take your script and break it down and look at what elements in there are effects, continuity issues that may arise that could be problematic. Say, for example, one of your characters has a scar in his face. Well, that scar has got to be consistent. So a lot of producers and directors will be like, oh, well, I just need him there for this one day. Well, no, you need them there every day that actor is on set, that makeup needs to be applied. Otherwise, your continuity is going to be out the door. So that's one element. But I think it's always imperative that every director and producer kind of just read up on the industry, read up on the history of it, know a few makeup artists and their legacy. Rick Baker has won more Academy Awards than anybody else. Look at their work and just be kind of like, okay, this is the creme de la creme, top notch. This is what, is the best of the best. And then take into account what you're looking for, because we all know that when we're working in independent films, we have a minimal budget. We have to figure out what we can do with whatever budget we have. So that's one element to take into account. And I'll get into budgeting stuff a little bit more here in a second. But when you do start looking around and asking around for makeup artists, a couple things to take into account is, make sure that they have some sort of portfolio, that they can show you some work they've done, and don't just take their words for it, because there are people who will be like, oh, I held the brush and applied a little bit of blood for the makeup artist, and they'll give you a picture of a full creature. And then you get them hired and get them on there, and then, you get on set and they have no clue what they're doing. So that's something just to take into account. I will say beware, not that they're all could be possibly problematic, but beware of people who strictly do haunt makeups. Haunt makeup artists are meant for people who they're kind of hobbyists. They're people who, will slather blood all over their face and love zombies because they can slather blood all over their face, and they really have no sense of character design, punctuality, time management, and you could run into a lot of problems there. Basically, you need somebody who knows the craft, knows the materials, knows what it means to be on set, what it means to schedule, working and communicating with production and director and everything, so that you're getting the best product, as well as the cinematographer. That's something that a lot of people fail to realize, is that the cinematography is going to be a great asset to the makeup effects. And any good makeup effects artist will want to be in contact with the DP, because it's all going to be in the lighting. How you're going to light that effect. How you light the effect could be the difference between a $400 effect or something that's going to cost you $50. It's just a matter of how it's going to be lit. Another thing to beware of is influencers. There are a lot of makeup influencers out there who will love to put videos of themselves doing makeup on themselves and whatnot. And though some of them are really impressive and great, the problem with influencers and people who do makeup strictly on themselves is that they very rarely can translate that talent over to another person's face. So you could run into a lot of problems there. So my mentor in the industry, his name is Mike Spatola, and he has literally had to rush in at the last minute because somebody hired an influencer who didn't know what they were doing, and had to rush in and kind of make amends and fix things for the or send in some of his students, because he's a teacher at cinema makeup school, and get them to go in there and actually help the production out, because the person they hired, who had 10 million followers, doesn't know how to apply a scar onto somebody's face. So that's just some things to take into account there. Also, know your project's limitations. I know a lot of people will shoot for the sky in terms of like their effects and whatnot. If they're doing an effects heavy movie, get the effects artist on as soon as possible, because they'll be able to tell you what they can and can't do within your budget. There's a lot of things that can be done cheaply. Again, working with the DP, working with the director, working with production, to make things look good and work well. But there's got to be a lot of communication, and it's got to be done as soon as humanly possible. I think a lot of, again, going back to that preconceived notion that we just show up with our brushes and our paint and we do these, make these magical things happen. They need to be brought on board as soon as possible as a key element in the production. So if you're, directing a short film or a feature-length film, and it's going to have quite a bit of effects, you're going to need to be like, okay, I need the talent. I need to find the actors. I need to find the DP. I need to find this, that, and the other. The effects artist better be one of those major people to be communicating with and finding right up front, because the more time you can give them in pre-production to get stuff done, the easier your life will be later on. Because if you're like the last minute going, we've got, we started in January and we're ready to shoot in May, and we're 2 weeks out from our first day of shooting. Oh, well, we never got a hold of a makeup artist. We better get a hold of somebody. And you have major prosthetics work that you had in your script. Most makeup artists, even the best, can't do it in 2 weeks. One thing that has kind of become a crutch is there was a show called Face Off, and Face Off was like, you can make these big major makeups in 2 days, 3 days. That's not the case. That's not how that show was. It kind of is it fibbed a lot in terms of how that industry worked, and they were always rushing about. Makeup artists want to give the production the best possible product all times. Any self-respecting makeup artists. We're not in it for fame. We're artists. We want to create something amazing. We want to create something amazing for your project. And my personal, and with my personality is, I'm always shooting for even though I have no ambition to ever, win an Academy Award, I'm always shooting for the top notch, as best as I can make it, because that's only going to make your project work better and look better. And it also is going to make me feel proud of the work that I'm giving you. Granted, not everybody's like that, but that's just how I am. I'm very much about going the extra mile to make sure that what I'm giving you is the absolute best for the production. Because again, I'm a filmmaker as well, and I understand the directing and the producing aspect of it. And if there's one little glitch in there, if you have some of the best actors and some of the best DP and just a great story, and it's amazing, and it has effects in it, and the effects look like somebody went to Party America and grabbed some cheap prosthetic off the wall, then it lessens the entire project. And not everybody's going to notice that, but the people who matter will see it and go, ooh, you must not have had a budget for effects. So always be very cognizant of what your limitations are in terms of budget, and scale things back. And the makeup artist will give you options. Any good makeup artist will give you options and saying, okay, well, if you wanted to do it this way, we could do it, this is what's all going to tell. And then we have kind of this mid-level, and then we have like the bare minimum, which is basically we're going to have to shoot almost in complete darkness and keep it hidden in the shadows to make this effect work. So that's kind of the pre-production aspect of it. Also, another thing in the pre-production aspect of it, getting into it, is know what you want. Be able to like have images, stuff like that, that you can show and communicate with the makeup effects artist of what you're wanting. Because a lot of people are like, well, I want this. Okay, well, what does that entail? Do you want, if it's a creature, it's like, what do you want in the creature? Is it just a face piece, or do you want more? Is it going to be a full head piece? Is it just a few little pieces? I mean, there's a lot to take into account for makeup artistry. And again, there are different materials and different processes that can be used to save money and work within the budget. But we got to know that final look, because if something's changed at the last minute, well, guess what? That's going to inflate that budget in order to repair it and fix it and get you back to square one, or get you back to the place where you originally wanted to, because there was a lack of communication up front. So I guess overall production is make sure that you're hiring the best people, because they're only going to make your project, your film better. Make sure that you communicate as soon as possible with them, and make sure that your communication is very clear with them up front. And also, just again, know the limitations of your project, know the limitations of your budget, and any good makeup artist who truly loves what you've written, what you're going to produce, thinks you're cool and gets along with you, they're going to try and find a way to work within the budget if it's something they believe in. Most films I do, yeah, I mean, they're low budget, they're independent films, but I enjoy working with the people, the directors, the DP. There's, Steve had mentioned something to me earlier about how the industry is spread out far and wide, but when it comes down to it, it's kind of a small community, and everybody will soon start to know each other. And if you have a good reputation, and you ask them to work with you, then you tend to want to work with it, because you work with those people because you've heard about them, their work ethic, their professionalism, and that's where you need to be at there. So I guess moving on from just the aspect of the pre-production ideals, budget. One thing that a lot of productions forget to do and take into account is that if there is a great deal of effects in your project, and even the smallest of ones, a lot of people are like, oh, well, we can just slap a scar on there. If you want the scar done right and to look good on screen to where you can film them in pretty much any lighting, gotta have money. Materials cost money. A lot of makeup artists will, give you some slack in terms of, time and effort costs, but materials, we can't just make magical things appear. Materials have to be purchased, and materials have to be the correct materials. I've had instances where people are like, why can't you just use this? I'm like, because that's not what we use. Typical one is we use a gypsum cement called Ultra Cal 30 to build stone molds. and it's not expensive, but it costs a little bit more than your typical plaster of Paris. Well, I've had people come up to me, it's like, why do you have to buy this? Why, questioning, more or less in a sense, questioning my integrity on what materials that I know I need to create what they want. They'll be like, why don't you just buy plaster of Paris? Well, plaster of Paris is not Ultra Cal 30. Plaster of Paris is a plaster and not a gypsum cement, and it's a plaster that expands. Gypsum cement or the Ultra Cal 30 gypsum doesn't. It pretty much whatever you make it as, it holds its shape. It doesn't expand, contract, nothing. And the reason we use that is so that when we're making pieces that fit specifically to an actor's face, that when we put it on their face, it fits specifically to their face. Plaster of Paris, on the other hand, if you were to use that, it'll expand. You create something, you put it on their face, and it's freaking huge. It doesn't fit them at all. And then you run into problems. So listen to them, make sure that they're not pulling your leg, and trying to use stuff that, doesn't make any sense. But most times I always give people options. There are different materials to be used. I'm a big champion of foam latex. It's one of the cheapest materials. It's old school. It's what they used in the 80s primarily. Bigger productions now love platinum silicone prosthetics. They're great. They need less painting. They go on a little bit smoother. But the problem with them is that they cost like 3 times as much. And again, don't ever ask a makeup artist to use the same prosthetic over and over and over again. It's unsanitary. And not only that, but you really can't use them over because the edges will be ruined and they have to be a new one. So that's another thing that has popped up from time to time, is why do I have to buy, this creature has to be on 14 out of the 20 days we're shooting. Why do I have to pay for a new prosthetic every day? Well, it's because we can't use the same prosthetic every day. So stuff like that needs to be communicated. And again, we'll get into the aspects of scheduling here in a second as well. But going back to the budget, always request options in terms of what they budget to you. I always ask a lot of questions. This is just me. I ask a lot of questions about what they're wanting, what it's going to be shot at. There's always that back and forth where the production will be like, well, how much is it going to cost? And I'm like, I can give you how much it's going to cost, but I also kind of need how much you have so that I can work within your budget and see if we can make it work. So make sure that going into it, you have an allotted budget, knowing how budgets work. If it's something that's like, well, if we spend an extra $200 and we could get the effect we wanted to, then, as on the production end, they could shift things around to get that. But if you don't have a clear-cut budget on the production side, then you're going to probably run into a lot of back and forth, because the makeup effects artist is going to give you the budget for what he thinks what he would do to make it work, to make it professional and great. And it's probably going to be, especially in the indie world, probably outside of what you had allotted budget-wise. But if we kind of have a ballpark, then we can give you an idea of like, well, this effect, we can do it this way or this way or this way, and work within the parameters of the budget you have. If this is a bigger studio production, then you literally just say, okay, well, this is all the stuff that I've seen in here, and this is your budget. There's a lot more bidding involved. So, and again, don't pay bottom dollar. You want to pay for a good makeup effects artist. It'll help you in the long run. Good makeup effects artists will work with you, be communicating with you constantly, giving you updates, showing you what they're doing, how the progress is going. And then, when we get into the scheduling, when they get on set, they won't be jacking around. They're going to be prepared. And that's something that starts with budget and communication. So when it comes to budget, just make sure that there's a lot of communication. But as I kind of mentioned before, typically I always give it at, the top dollar. If we had $10,000 budget for this indie film, just for makeup. And again, Sometimes that is actual feasible, but we can work within, it just depends on the project. But say that top dollars, if we had a $10,000 budget, this is what you're going to get. These are all the effects that you have, and these are the materials that we'd be using, and here is what the materials would cost. And then there's kind of like, okay, if we have $5,000, this is what we can do. And then there's like, I always put it a bare minimum of saying, 2,000 is the bare minimum I can do or am willing to do this project for, because anything lower than that isn't worth my time and isn't worth what I know I can create with a budget less than that. So it's good to communicate. Big thing is just communication. Always communicate with makeup effects artists. And any good makeup effects artist is going to want to communicate with production as much as possible to make sure that they're getting things done and they're getting it all worked up into a good working relationship that moves forward into production. So kind of jumping onto from that, we'll go into kind of the scheduling aspect of it. A lot of people, again, going back to, magic workers, and we jump in with our makeup brushes and just make things happen at the spur of the moment. Again, that's definitely not the case. Pre-production, we want to have everything ready to go as soon as possible, and even the best of the best will still be toiling and to get things done right up until the day of production. I know that I've screwed about. To give you an idea, I worked on a movie called I Am Lisa last summer. I was also one of the producers on that. And the lead actress that we had, that the executive producer had hired her and wanted her on the project very much so. We had done a proof of concept trailer for it. She was the lead in that. And then we were going to just bring her over into the feature. And around the first of the year, about 6 months before we started actual production, she started getting real flighty. I kept asking to set up dates to do life casting and body casting, and she kept blowing me off. And basically it came down to the culmination is like I went to the Crimson Screen Film Festival, and the weekend before that, I had said, hey, listen, this is drop dead. I will not have enough time to get all this makeup and all these prosthetics done. If we wait any longer, it's got to be today, because I'm going to be gone the next weekend, and then we're a month out, and I've got to be building, I got to be sculpting, I've got to be making stuff. And we were all set and everything like that. Saturday, we're going to do it on Sunday. That Saturday night, about midnight, I get a text from the executive producer going, I don't know if you've heard, I don't know if she's told anything to you, but yeah, she's not going to make it tomorrow. Needless to say, I was livid. I was very angry. And the next day, I went to the executive producer's home, and I said, as a producer, it is my opinion that we need to step away and fire this actress, because if we're going to be dealing with this in pre-production, what do you think is going to happen during production? So long story short is that we did let that actress go, but then we went into a skewering fit trying to find a replacement. We did find one 2 weeks after the removal of the previous actress, and which gave me less than a month to create lots of effects, lots of prosthetics. So we would work for 5 days and then had 2 days off, and I was still sculpting stuff on set when I had downtime, because I was pretty much there every single day to maintain some effect, some aspect of the production had some sort of effect, some sort of makeup that I had to maintain. And then on my days off, I would sleep in 4-hour intervals to make sure that the materials that we needed, the prosthetics we needed, were done for the next 5 days of shooting. That's not exactly how I like to go about doing a production, but I made it work because, again, I was also a producer as well as the makeup effects artist, and to me, I want to give the production the best possible product, even if I have to sacrifice a little bit of sleep. But yes, so scheduling is big. So then we talk about pre-production scheduling and making sure that there's plenty of time for the makeup effects artist to build the stuff, to do the body cast, the life casts, whatever needs to be done to get said prosthetics, said effects created. When it comes to scheduling them on the day of production, you really need to communicate with the director, or the director and the producer and the makeup effects artist all need to sit down during the schedule and start talking about how long it's going to take to make these effects work. Because as any person who's dealt with makeup effects, there's kind of they don't always work the first time if it's an effect. And if it's a prosthetic, well, guess what? It takes quite a few hours to get stuff on. I like to think that I can work pretty quickly, but at the same time, quickness doesn't always translate over to the best product. So I just always try to communicate. And like in the case of I Am Lisa, when we're in a production and we had the big finale where, our lead actress has her full werewolf prosthetic on and her teeth and her nails on, and she has bloody wrists from some stuff and another chest piece. I made sure that I worked with the production manager and the director and everybody and say, listen, it's like, if her on-set call time is, I think it was like 10 a.m., then I need to be applying these prosthetics on her by no later than 6:30 a.m. And so that's something that needs to be communicated to actors, that if there is effects and effects that are going to be on them, they need to understand that their day is going to be a lot longer than just literally than the actual time on set, because they got to be prepped. So there's that element in terms of scheduling. To talk about actors, kind of circle back around to them. Not every actor likes having prosthetics on, believe it or not. A lot of them don't like it, whether it's ego, vanity, uncomfortability. So that's something that production needs to communicate with actors that they are going to be potentially working with, because it's a long process, both in the pre-production aspect of it as well as the application and the removal. That's a good case in point for looking for makeup artists. Makeup effects artists, my philosophy as a makeup effects artist job is not done until the prosthetic and everything is removed from the actor. I've worked on productions, theater productions mainly, where the quote unquote makeup artist showed up, applied the makeup, and then went home and didn't care about the actor's integrity of their face, their skin. You're putting chemicals on them, you're putting stuff that's going to break them out. And a good makeup artist knows how to deal with that and make sure that the actor's face is going to be as fresh as it was day 1, day 2, day 20. But actors do need to be informed that if they are going to be having prosthetics, that that is going to be part of their employment on the production. I know a more high profile film. It was a Disney film. And not that we're great friends, but I have communicated with him. But Dave Elsie, who is a special effects makeup artist, he won the Academy Award with Rick Baker for The Wolfman, was hired to do the Beast for Disney's live action version of Beauty and the Beast. And without naming names or anything like that, it was very well known that Disney wasn't too keen on funding practical makeup, and the individual that was cast in the role was very adamant about not having stuff on his face at all, which is, again, if you're going to be looking to play the role of a creature in a movie, you probably better understand that there's going to be some sort of makeup involved. By the flip side, you have somebody like Ron Perlman or Doug Jones. If you don't know who Doug Jones is, you should definitely look him up. The man is like the premier creature performer. He was Abe Sapien. He was the amphibious man in Shape of Water. These guys know the process. It's not a comfortable process, but they know how to move in it. They like it. It helps them in their performance. So you have two spectrums. So it's something to be taken into account when you are working with, thinking about actors and stuff like that, being very upfront with them, letting them know if there is a part of their role that is going to involve prosthetics, that, you know, the process is going to be a certain way. And you can always bring your makeup effects artist in on that conversation as well. I like to communicate with the actors as soon as possible so we can build up a rapport, a trust, a mutual respect for one another, and so that I can let them know that my job is to take care of them and make sure that they, you know, are comfortable and as comfortable as humanly possible in the prosthetics, in the makeup, so that they can perform. And at the end of the day, when it's all off, that they, you know, they don't have any worries about things. So that's one of the key things with actors. Director of photography, again, I like to really get to know the director of photography, see his style beforehand, to see how they like to light. And then when I get on set, I like to communicate with them, especially with the effects and how they're going to light it. I had the opportunity to work with, on the last two projects, the same DP, one for I Am Lisa, as well as the project I worked with on Steve back in October. The DP was Hanuman Brown Eagle, and he is quite a stickler for making sure what's in front of his camera is what he wants it to be. So he definitely has a director's eye. As a makeup effects artist, I like to think I have a director's eye in terms of the makeup. And then of course the director has, you know, the look of the shot. So it's that great collaboration between the three minds on an effect or a prosthetic on how to light it properly and make sure that it sells what you're trying to get across with it. One thing I learned early on is that when I look at a finished makeup, I'm typically looking at it in a lot of light, because I have to have a lot of light to make sure I get edges glued down, I get it painted properly, and it looks good. The thing is that it took me a bit to, you know, realize is that as great as it looks in the real light, when I get on set, it's going to be a lot of contrast. There's going to be a lot of shadows and this, that, and the other. But I always shoot for what does it look like in the brightest of the bright, as close as you can get without seeing any blemishes, anything like that. And so that when I go in to on set and we actually get down there, if there is something that I find problematic, I communicate that with the director and the DP so that we can work together to potentially avoid use light to cover a bad edge. I just finished a short film 2 weekends ago. I did makeup effects for, which was quite interesting in the post current COVID world. Just a lot of safety standards, a lot of cleanliness, which was what I did anyway. I always wore gloves when I work with actors, and now I just wore a mask when I applied stuff. So there wasn't too much of a change for me. But it was a very small production, very quick, and I had to put prosthetics on the arms and finger extensions. We had a limited amount of time, so I quickly applied it, and there was one little edge that I didn't have time to fix. So I just talked to the DP and said, listen, this has got this bad little edge here. Can I see the lighting setup and how you're going to do this? So he showed me all that stuff, and we had the actor go in there, and all three of us worked together with the director, and we got to where she knew how to move her arm into the shot. And in this case, she was pulling out this knife out of a knife holder to get the shot without, seeing that edge that I didn't like. So again, it's just, good communication and working, because when you're doing effects, whether it's prosthetics or an actual effect like a blood gag where the neck is bleeding out or anything like that, you're pulling off magician's tricks ultimately. So it's just a matter of what do you need to do? How do you need to manipulate the image, ultimately the edit to sell the effect to the person viewing it? Because whereas we may know as producers, directors, makeup effects artists, DPs, we may know all the little bits and pieces that go into a sequence of an effect for a film. The audience isn't going to know it unless it's blatant. So as long as we can make that magic trick, make that sleight of hand work, then we've accomplished what our ultimate goal is. So I don't know. I think I've covered most of my stuff. We're about at the hour limit. I will say, and this is just kind of, I've taken this from my friend Alan Apon, who owns a company called Mel Products. They deal in Pax Paint, which is one of the key makeups that we use for foam latex prosthetics. But he created a phrase for his company recently that I thought was really great, and I think it's across the spectrum a good phrase. Is that respect the craft, respect all of the craft in the film production, and the craft will respect you right back. So again, kind of top highlights is communication, work with the director and everybody, the work with makeup effects artists and everybody on production to make sure that the deadlines are met, budgets are met, and that you can create something amazing for any production. So we can do questions or whatever, Steve.
Yeah, I have some questions for you, and
Yes.
then we can open it up to Stephanie and Nick and whoever else is around. What I love that you said first was when you're talking about the budget and working with all sorts of different kinds. Even when I start a movie, and let's say I'm talking to investors or something like that, I do the same sort of thing. I say, well, there's tier A, and then there's B, and then there's C.
Which I might have gotten that from you.
You might have.
Well, because I mean, one of the things with us was that way back at when we first started talking, became friends. One of the first things you ever gave me was your budget breakdown for investors for Pep Squad. And I still have that, and it's always been kind of an influence and inspiration to me, because I can go, oh, well, look, Steve always broke these down into tiers of, this would be fantastic if we had this budget, and, so on and so forth. But yeah, so I probably got that, probably influenced me somewhere along the lines.
Probably, but I think that's a really good practice, because if money's no object, or if the person you're talking to, even let's say if it's a small budget movie and you've only got $100,000 or something, and if you see that this effect at the top tier is going to cost $20,000, and at the middle tier might cost 10, and at the bottom tier might cost 5, the effect of the $10,000 or the $5,000 one might be to raise the value of the production in such a way that it might actually be worth spending the top tier choice.
Exactly.
And then maybe cutting back in other areas, moving the money around.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned briefly that, it's like, if it's something that is like, just, there's only really one good way to do it, then there's a way to kind of shift on the production end of things, shift the funds around if it's something that just has to be done. And also, as a makeup effects artist, if they're like, oh my God, I don't think we can do that, I always give options. I mean, not even just those 3 tiers, but also, well, what is it you're trying to accomplish with this effect? Because there might be an alternative to it.
Exactly. And that I love too. It's like when we've worked together in the past, I say, well, okay, so the money is tight, this part. Here's what we have. How can we make it work? Or maybe we can't. But if we can't make it work, maybe what are some other choices? I loved what you said about, if, let's say you don't have much money, but you could get a similar feeling as a viewer watching it if, let's say, it's a silhouette, and it's very little going on, but in the image of it, you get out of it. It's like almost as if to say there's no such thing as a budget limitations don't necessarily mean that there are any creative limitations. In fact, it might be the reverse. It's like, here's our budget limitations, so let's figure out how to create in this to make it look like that was the intention all along.
Exactly. And I think that's what's great about that too, Steve, is that both of you and I come from the realm of making it work, I guess, in terms of production. So, you'd mentioned when the budget is, there's no limit on budget. You look at these big, massive $350 million budgets. If they don't like it, they just go back and fiddle with it until it loses all integrity. But in low budget and independent film, you have your intended idea. But again, that's why I like to communicate with the director and the producers and stuff like that. Say, what can we do to accomplish this if we don't have the budget for it? And that is what ultimately kind of excites me a lot of times, is because we have to get our heads wrapped around why we do cinema, why we are artists and creatives in the first place, is that we like the thrill and the challenge of creating the art. And sometimes art isn't as necessarily clear cut as we may think it is. And we need to be open to the potential for, altering it, coming up with creative alternatives and whatnot. Which is funny. I will say, you were talking about silhouette on that short film that I just wrapped up on. They had a sequence where the monster rips the head off. Well, you didn't have the budget to show that kind of effect, so they literally did it in silhouette and a shadow on the wall. And it's, I think it'll look great.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time I did the shadow on the wall trick it was a sexual scene. It wasn't a sex scene, but it was an intimate sexual, maybe an erotic scene in Casserole Club. And it was these two women, Susan Traylor and Daniela C., and they were just sort of tracing the outline of their body. And when I saw the shadow on the wall, even though the actresses were totally fine doing it for the camera, I thought that the shadow on the wall was more appealing. Like, I was like, that looks amazing. Like, that translates something else. We don't have to see what's going on, but if we watch that shadow, it's actually more interesting than looking at it. And I've also found that special effects, violence, gore, sex, any sort of explicit, whatever the subpart of explicit means, it could be any one of those things. The less you show is more in most cases.
Exactly. And the thing is that, and I've talked to other friends about this, I think in this day and age with these mega budget productions and stuff like that, it's let me spoon feed it to you here. There's no visual, in my opinion, they sort of disrespect the audience. They spoon feed them what they're seeing, instead of thinking about imagery that can invoke something. Case in point, kind of going off of what you said, take into example the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre that Tobe Hooper did. That movie has no gore in it, but I swear you can talk to anybody and they'll tell you it's like the goriest movie they've ever seen. You never see anything happen. It's always a matter of edits. Your brain fills in what you want it to, whether, again, like you said, whether it's extreme violence, whether it's something of sexual nature. It doesn't necessarily always have to be seen in the explicit. Seeing it in the subliminal can oftentimes be even more interesting. Not only that, but invoke a stronger mental image for the viewer that you don't necessarily get if you just flat out show it.
Totally. And when we did in both Helltown and any time that I've ever used special effects for the most part, it's interesting how much time it takes to make the thing work, how much money it takes to make the thing work. And then you see it for not even a second.
Yep.
And that's what is amazing to me, is that, all this effort is going into something that is only on screen for 24 frames. Sometimes it's 22 frames.
Mm-hmm.
But it's enough that it's doing what you're saying. Unconsciously, you start piecing the pieces together, and it works. The other thing I wanted to say, which was interesting, that you talked about with the actors involved and some actors not wanting the stuff on their face. When we did the one in Maine, I remember how Sarah Clarke was, totally willing and eager, and she was in there. You're gonna do a full face cast, right, of her face, and she didn't realize what that was going to be like until she was already in it, right?
Well, kind of. I again going back to it. After you had put me in touch with them, I talked to her a lot going into it. She didn't quite understand what it was going to all entail, I don't think, but I was um, very much open and told her the process. We walked through the process, and honestly, the only moment that she said that she kind of had a moment where it was too much for her was when we were taking it off.
Oh, okay.
But other than that, again, she had commented too, and this is how I always approach it: was a makeup artist, in my opinion, needs to be somebody who communicates with their actors. Their actors are, in a sense, their children in a way. They need to know what the process is, how things are going to go, what materials are used. And again, another thing with Sarah was I communicated with her not only about the effect stuff that she was going to go through, but just her day-to-day makeups. We talked about what kind of makeup she liked, what kind of makeup she wanted to use. People have preferences. And so again, it's just that communication. But yeah, I mean, I think, and she did say that because Xander has also dabbled in makeup artistry quite a bit in his own career, so he knew the process and knows the process and stuff like that. But she had mentioned that because it was me and not somebody she knew really well, but had total faith and total professional integrity and knowing what my special skills were. She said that she'd had people around her that she knew that it would have heightened her level of self-consciousness about the process. So the fact that when we did do the head cast, that it was just her and I, and we even videotaped, we did a time lapse of the whole thing. So you can actually see it. And again, there's only like right at the end is the only time you can really see her kind of like, all right, get this damn thing off my face, which honestly is what every actor is like. Every actor, right, as that thing's ready to come off, it's like, get it the hell off.
Okay, how long did it take?
I try to go pretty darn quick. There's a lot of preparation. I think that's the thing on all of it, whether it's doing a head cast, doing anything. There's a lot of prep before we actually get into the process. The process itself is fairly quick because the materials we use are plaster bandages and alginate, and that stuff sets up in maybe 15 minutes tops. But what I did was to ease her concerns is that we did the bald cap, got her ears out, and I did the back half first and just straight up plaster bandage because I don't need any of the detail back there. So she had half of it on before we put anything on her face. And I also started by doing the ears first, and then I did the forehead, and then I did everything around here. And the last thing I did was the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So she never felt claustrophobic. Because that's always one of the questions is asked actors if they're claustrophobic, and that's what I had asked Sarah. She said, "Yeah, I'm kind of claustrophobic." But yeah, that was the last bit, and then it was just plaster bandage as quickly as possible. I had all that stuff laid out, ready to go. So by the time that last bandage was put on, she was probably only under all of it, completely under it for probably 3 minutes.
Interesting.
Because once that, like the alginate will be gelled, the first plaster bandage goes on here. The back's already solid. So the top one starts drying the second you put it on. And by the time I put the last pieces on here to reinforce, I've probably only got maybe 2 to 3 minutes before it hardens up enough. And then I can have her bend over, and just by breaking the suction, it'll come off. But yeah, I mean, ears are always a little bit more problematic because you've got to bend them to get them out. But yeah, I mean, the process is a lot more getting to the point than it is actually performing the act of getting it done with a life cast. So,
what is the longest hours that you have spent doing any kind of an effect?
Definitely exposure. And the reason I say exposure is because exposure involved a creature suit. So there was a lot.
Full body?
What's that?
Was that a full body suit?
It was half. I realized that I couldn't do the full suit in one whole fell swoop. So I just did it from like the waist up and the arms, and then life casted the legs separately because we knew he was going to be wearing pants. Ultimately, we ran out of time and didn't get to do the legs anyway, so it didn't really matter. And again, that's things that you've got to take into account on low budgets when you're doing stuff. It's like, okay, what needs to happen, what is absolutely essential to have done, and what is something that is cool, but if we don't get to it, like how much are we going to show the feet? we didn't show them at all. So it would have been a waste of money and time to rush around trying to get those feet done. But yeah, that one was quite intense. And it also too, I always try to, on each production, try to figure out and find something new to do to push myself, so that it's not just, I don't get complacent with stuff. And on that one, it was doing the creature suit, the whole process, which was much more involved. I knew the process, but there's a lot more involved in it than I had anticipated. And I got it all done, and I'm still proud of it. But yeah, it's just, it's one of those things that was like, wow, this takes a lot more work. And the materials for that were polyester resin and fiberglass, which yeah, was not exactly the most wonderful material in the world to be working with. It's very stinky, very toxic to smell. So I, always had to wear a ventilator and had to have circulation. And so
I don't even know what it is, but it sounds terrifying.
Oh, it is. Well, to give you an idea, so my mentor, Mike Spatola, he's been in the industry since the early 80s. He did all of the painting work on Terminator 2 for all of the prosthetics and stuff like that. He painted the Predator 2 suits. He worked on trimmers. He worked on Iron Man 3, stuff like that. So when I asked him, when I told him what I was doing, he goes, this is still, to me, makes me laugh, obviously. I said, Mike, I'm going to do a process. I'm going to make a polyester fiberglass body or a life cast. And he goes, why? And I didn't know what he meant at the time. The next time I saw him, I was like, I get it now. I get it. But there are people who are like in the industry who just, that's like their thing. They just love it and they've got it down to a T. And so it was a learning curve for me, but I mean, I learned a lot from it. I would love to do it again, but again, it's a budgetary thing. We had the budget to do that because we were making a creature feature. It was kind of like, if we don't make a creature, then we can't make this movie. So the budget was really put towards the effects and the creature work. And I also did some puppetry on that, regular prosthetics. There was a lot of like little puppetry effects in that. So it wasn't just like prosthetics, gluing on a scar, cut, doing makeup. There was a lot more technical stuff being built for that one. So that was definitely one of the more intense ones. But yeah, they all have their own challenges. Like I Am Lisa, there was the challenge of time. When you replace your lead actress, 3 weeks out before you start shooting, and none of her stuff she hasn't even been life casted yet, let alone sculpted or molded, any prosthetic. It, changes the intensity level of it. So, but yeah, definitely exposure. And again, right now I'm working on producing a short film in August, producing it and also doing the makeup effects for it. And I'm doing a different kind of bodysuit, but it's more of a costume. Think of like one of the things that inspired me in terms of partially of the look was David Lynch's Dune and how the Arrakis bodysuits looked like. If anybody knows that, so it's going to be kind of a foam fabricated suit with some other bits, and then there'll be a sculpted helmet and some prosthetic work. But again, I wanted to kind of go past the actually sculpting and making a foam latex bodysuit and actually taking something and just kind of more organically building it and doing a foam fabrication. So that was my challenge for this one. So
that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping. I mean, the thing is like I work full time during the day, so this is still kind of like I work in the evenings on it. But I've really enjoyed the process with it. I'm really excited to actually start, applying the bits and pieces, because again, you can just like sculpt little pieces here and there and glue it on there and add all kinds of organic, stuff to it, and really create something, a little bit more. I guess organic is the best way of putting it, instead of sculpting something and you've got that aspect. This is just literally kind of letting things fall where they lie. I've got a design, I've got an idea and stuff like that, but it's kind of a new technique that I haven't embraced yet. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Cool. Sounds amazing. I look forward to seeing it.
Yes, I'm pretty excited about it. It's the first time that I've been the sole producer on something. So again, I've taken
Good
everything.
luck.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's been going pretty well. It's still a short film, and we're getting really artsy with it. The whole sole idea that this spawned from was on the short film that I directed. We did a driving sequence where we just did a poor man style. We blacked out a garage and just put lights up and shook the car and filmed people talking, and you can't tell the difference.
Right.
So my friend, who was my first AD on that, he wrote this script, and he's like, basically, I just liked that technique that we did, and thought that we could just make a movie basically sort of around that idea, and just really boost up crazy lighting setups and bring in fans and fog machines and blow stuff around, and just do it really old school. We're talking now about getting a rear screen projector so that we can do rear screen projection stuff, just to really take it back to kind of a more of an old school, rough and dirty kind of thing without digital effects, but just doing it there on set. So whatever's in the background we're playing and projecting back there is what we're filming.
I love that. And I was just going to ask you about special effects CGI versus actual live effects, or the combination of both. And I personally, I'm fine with CGI. In fact, we have some. I don't know if you've seen it in the latest movie. I don't know if you've seen the latest, all the VFX stuff that we have in there.
I haven't seen the VFX version yet, no.
But we have that. But then we also have practical live effects. So we're using both. But I'm in the ballpark of, typically, if I'm going to tell a story like Star Wars, I would appreciate that they all be actual robots, actual things, as opposed to CGI.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
My feeling is that, well, I guess it's twofold. First of all, it's a tool. Just like anything, it's a tool for production. Like I was mentioning earlier about the bad edge. Well, that bad edge could have been fixed in post-production with a little bit of money for VFX. You could go in there and just basically Photoshop, I can't remember, After Effects or whatever they use to do that, but you could like touch it up. Do they go overboard sometimes? God, yes. Case in point, trying to think of one that they really just, well, I'd mentioned the Beauty and the Beast movie. That's one that just went too far. It was just like, oh, we're just going to do it all CGI. All CGI, basically the rule of thumb is, and I know I'm kind of bouncing all over the place, Jurassic Park, when Spielberg made that movie, digital effects really hadn't taken off. Now, the reason that movie holds up now, 25 years later, something like that, and still looks amazing compared to the recent ones that they've made that look very cheap, in my opinion, because they're all CGI dinosaurs. Why did it work back then, and why does it still look good now? Because it was a combination. They built actual animatronic dinosaurs, and you see that. You see the actors interacting with that. The only time that they used CGI heavily was in the full body shots, because there was no way to make it move. There was no way to get it to do what they wanted it to. So when it comes to CGI, my opinion is like, if you need it for a wide shot, if you need it for a full scale body shot, fine, dandy, that's great. Obviously you can't do that in reality. But if it's going to be a human interacting with something, for God's sake, make a puppet. I mean, I've seen movies here recently where, the actual human actors interacting with something, and it could have easily been a puppet, but no, it's CGI. So it doesn't, when they touch it, because they're literally just touching like a green ball, it just doesn't have the same organic feel as if they would have literally just taken the time, used a real puppet. But again, productions or studios and stuff like that, they'll, when they redid or didn't redo it, they did the prequel to The Thing. A couple 10 years ago now, I guess it is, but John Carpenter's film he made in the 80s, which was a remake of The Thing from Another World that Howard Hawks produced, but John Carpenter did that. He let Rob Bottin do it, and Rob Bottin created everything practical, and Stan Winston did some stuff too for a couple shots, but it was all practical and it looks amazing. Now, when they did the prequel remake or whatever you want to call it, about 10 years ago, they had a company called ADI come in, and ADI were proteges of Stan Winston, as Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr. They did everything practically. I've seen the practical effects. They looked amazing. The studio came in after the fact and goes, "Oh, that doesn't look real enough, CGI it." So they literally CGI'd on top of all the practical stuff.
Oh my God, crazy.
Yeah, and that is where I think that's when I get angry about it, because that is, to me, you're infringing on the artistic integrity of the person who made the practical effect. If it's something to add an enhancement to it or to fix something, that's fine. But when you're literally going in there and ignoring the fact that there was something live on set that was built and used and articulated brilliantly, just for the sake of saying, "Oh, well, we don't like it," then that's when I have a problem with CGI. It's a tool. It should be used, but it should be used in moderation.
Right.
And I think that's where my stance is like, it's never going away. But I will say another problem with CGI, and I mentioned Jurassic Park a little bit ago, but Jurassic Park still holds up. It still looks amazing. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that 90% of the dinosaurs in that damn movie are real.
Yeah.
They were guys in suits. They were animatronics. They were big fucking puppets, pardon my French. But, they went out of their way to build these things. And you look at Jurassic World, and I don't know, I dare anybody to go and watch those movies back to back or compare them. And Jurassic World already looks dated. It looks old.
Totally.
Because the CGI,
Yeah, it's a perfect example.
Yeah, and again, you want to go into the realm of the Marvel universe and say what you will about DC, but DC does have a tendency to do a lot more practical stuff. They build the costumes, they build the things they drive. I think the only thing they CGI for the most part is majorly CGI is like the capes, because it's just they can control it, and capes are really hard to control. But Marvel just loves their CGI. And the thing is that if you go back and watch the first Iron Man, those suits were built.
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. was in suits, and they used CGI to enhance it. Now, in the last one they came out with, Endgame, there's a shot, and it shows all of them walking. I think it's like right before they go back in time or whatever, and they've all got these like Avenger suits on. Not a damn one of them are real. They CGI'd them on them. And I just think that is the most piss poor, insanely idiotic thing that you can do. Before too long, we're just going to have people in green suits, because after the fact, studio can go in there and change whatever they want.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
They don't actually have to have costumes. And again, at the top level, these big major films, they would rather not do any pre-production work with effects artists or costumers or anything like that anymore. They don't want to do that because it costs money that they're ultimately going to change in post-production. I remember reading a story when Patty Jenkins, who ultimately directed Wonder Woman and is directing the new Wonder Woman 84, she was offered, I believe it was the second Thor movie. I believe it was. But that fell through, and she didn't wind up directing it. And I remember reading a story about how during the pre-production talks that she asked them about the third act. She goes, "Well, we don't have a third act. It's not really drawn out. And, I want to make sure that, what we're doing, this, that, and the other." And Marvel basically came in and says, "Don't worry about that. We'll figure that out after you're done shooting."
Oh, how crazy.
Meaning that they don't, it's all by committee. It has no, literally, from what I understand, the directors want to get on a Marvel movie because it gives them the integrity to go do what they want to do. But essentially, they're there to literally go action, cut, and then Marvel Studios will go in there and manipulate it however they want to. I know that in Infinity War, the one before Endgame, and again, I kind of stopped watching them because they just are too product-y to me. There's not much interesting things to them anymore to me. But in Infinity War, like, they had a whole sequence with the Hulk that would have made what ultimately he shows up as in Endgame make more sense. And they shot it, and they just decided, nah, we don't need that. We'll just cut it out. And it was supposed to be, and again, you think about all the freaking money, like the stuff that they shot, that they cut out, could have funded probably 6 of our own projects, Steve.
I know, it's crazy.
It's like, and again, that's why as I've gotten older and grumpier. I always tell everybody, it's like, I've gotten to be an grumpy old man, and all the last Star Wars movie just held no joy to me. It felt like it was made by a committee.
I'm sure it was.
Oh yeah, and Last Jedi I thought was brilliant. There's a lot of, the fanboys hate that one, but I was like, Rian Johnson made a movie. He had ideas, and he wanted to challenge the status quo of this franchise, and they didn't like that, so they came back and they literally is like, here's a paint by numbers, give them what they want so that they'll, we'll make the money, and
right.
Whatever. But no, so I've really gotten intrigued with kind of my first love was indie film. That's what got me into it. I hit prime film, becoming a prime film lover during the 80s, when most horror films were all independently produced, and then I hit the early 90s when Spike Lee was coming out, Quentin Tarantino, Kevin Smith, just all these indie directors who just like, hey man, we got $500, let's go make a movie and see what happens. And I enjoy watching cinema now that I can tell that there was a pure passion and joy and love of the craft behind the making of it. And I just don't feel that with especially CGI messes anymore. It looks like a damn cartoon, and it just doesn't excite me anymore.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree with you. Before we go, Stephanie and Nick, do you guys have any questions for Jake?
Hey, Jake.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
Okay. No, I'll defer to you. Go ahead, Stephanie. Go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering if Jake was able to work with chemically sensitive actors, or if they're chemically sensitive, are they just out of the project?
No. There's always options. And I mentioned a little bit earlier talking to my actors as soon as possible about like claustrophobia. One of the things I asked them is about their skin routine. Have they ever experienced any sort of allergic reaction to anything like that? Or they have latex allergies, because again, we deal with a lot of latex. And again, that will ultimately lead to a conversation, if they are allergic to latex, with production about materials. Because if they're allergic to latex, we can't glue latex prosthetics on them. There are alternatives, but we got to know that. We got to know that up front. I can't, you don't want to have an actor not ask the actor that question. So you don't ask them that question. You go through all of it, and then you get on set, and you've made all these foam latex prosthetics, and they're like, "What's this made out of?" Well, it's foam, latex. Oh, I'm allergic to latex. Well, now you're completely screwed. You've got all these prosthetics, all this work, all this money's been put into something that can't be used because you don't want it to ruin this actor's skin or have them have an allergic reaction, which is going to ultimately lead to problems, insurance-wise, actor-wise, whatnot. So again, it's one of those questions you ask. Latex is typically the one that we run into. There are materials that you can use on the skin to prep it to where it lessens the sensitivity to any sort of material or any sort of glues and stuff like that. And also it comes down to what kind of glues you're using. I mentioned haunter makeup artists. And what I mean by that is, again, there's, the haunted house has always come about. They're people like, oh, look, I bought this cheap prosthetic from wherever. Party America seems to be the one that they all grab stuff from, and they're using spirit gum, and spirit gum should never be used on an actor, in my opinion. There is a medical grade adhesive that we use. It's called Prosaid. And again, it's medical grade. It's meant for medical purposes, so it's been put through the ringer in terms of allergens. I always test it out if they're not aware of it. Just put a little drop on their skin, see what happens. Kind of like what they do when they test you for what you're allergic to at the doctor's office. But there's that, and then there's also silicone adhesives, and silicone adhesives again are, you know, they're usually very. I know the one that I use, it's even vegan friendly. You know, they don't test it on animals or anything like that, and it's kind of the standard go-to. But again, a good makeup artist will ask those questions, and a good makeup artist will also know their materials and know what alternatives there are. Latex, again, you could use platinum silicones. It's going to run you a little bit more money, but for the safety and integrity of, you know, your production, you want to go that way. There's also, if it's scars and stuff like that, there are things called prosthetic transfers, which are essentially that prosthetic adhesive, but it's been thickened, and you make little prosthetics out of it. Again, since it's, you know, medical grade adhesive and it's meant to go on the human skin, and most people don't have allergies to it, those would be a good alternative because they're made out of a glue that's okay. Not only that, but when it comes to scars and wounds, that's usually what I use because they go on like 3D temporary tattoos, and you can literally do a whole, you know, whole face of cuts and scars and stuff like that and paint it in 30 minutes.
Can I interrupt you? Can I ask you? Some people are really sensitive to even the fumes. So even for the rest of the crew, are you able, when you apply that stuff, able to do those people just somewhere else so that the fumes don't even waft into the filming area?
Yes, I always want an area for makeup. It needs to have its own area because I'm gonna spread out stuff. I'm gonna have a lot of chemicals, and even in terms of the actor with the fumes, you know, most of the fumes that we have for the stuff that we use dissipates very quickly. With the alcohol makeups we use 99% alcohol. And though when you first smell it, God, yeah, it kind of takes you back a bit, but it dissipates so quickly because it's almost 100 proof alcohol. It disappears. But for the actors, I also give them a little hand fan that they have it blowing it like near their face when I'm applying, so those fumes go away. But yeah, I always try to request having a place away from just for, you know, the sake of the DP and all that other stuff. I don't want to be near what they're doing. I don't want to, you know, be making a noise. And, you know, also too, if they're shooting some other scene that doesn't involve me, I don't want to be that guy that's clanging around brushes or something when they, you know, I mess up a take for them or anything like that. So I always try to be a good area away from where the action's happening.
We like that too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and like when the last production that Steve and I did, like we had the luxury of being in a very big open house that had a lot of empty rooms. So we just kind of set up shop in one room, and that was our costume, hair, and makeup, and where we did the hair and makeup. And it was completely like, we didn't even, I think the closest place we shot from that room was the kitchen area, which was still, you know, 15.
Or 2 rooms away.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and again, too, it gives the actors too. I know that when I was working with Xander and Sarah, it became kind of more of you're the hair and makeup stylist, and you kind of get that whole, well, how was your day? Oh, that was great. How are the kids doing? And it just kind of takes them away from having to be on. And I found that actors really enjoy that time to just kind of, you know, either be in their head space if they need to, if they're trying to prepare for the scenes coming up, or if they want to communicate, being away from all the madness of what's getting set up kind of helps them get into a better headspace for performance-wise too, I found. So
Totally. Nick, Stephanie, you have more?
Oh no, I was just gonna say thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Nick?
So yeah, hi guys. Jake, I like you when you bounce around. You said you were bouncing around about 20 minutes ago, and for me, it's been the best part. Thank you. I mean, I just picked up so much in this last extended edition here that kind of will help me in some of the scenes I've been trying to storyboard, like shadow on the walls. You could do, if you've got something really violent going on, you could see it in shadow effect in great detail, but yet you're not actually looking at the object itself. probably makes it even better. I can't wait to try
Well,
that.
and another thing, Nick, that like in this next one that we're doing, that I'm producing and doing the makeup effects for, to give you an idea of something that also can be used to your advantage is sound. Think about what sounds you're gonna have in the final edit. Because with this one, the director had written this scene, or the writer director had written this scene where we kill the one of the main characters, the serial killer, and it kills this main character. And originally, he was going to have the guy forcibly have to watch his girlfriend being murdered in front of him, and then he ultimately gets killed. And I was like, that's we've all seen that. There's nothing interesting about that. So he and I talked it through, and ultimately what we came up with is like this: keep everything in the perspective of the guy who is tied up and has to listen to what is happening. We don't see it ever in the movie, the way we storyboarded it. It's all sound. It's all camera is just slowly pushing in on him and his reactions. And all we as an audience member are watching his reactions and hearing what is going on.
Terrifying.
And again, exactly. That's why. And again, and then you think about the sounds and you think about the visuals. Again, I mentioned it before. It's like, but we as filmmakers, as makeup effects artists, we're magicians in a way. We need to get back to remembering that we're that, and that we are showing them what we want them to see and hear and experience. And sometimes that involves not showing them everything, but letting them fill in the blanks.
Totally. I remember, and I'm sorry to interrupt just real quick, and then you can go on. But I remember once I had a friend who always said, when they would go to a horror movie, they would shut their eyes and turn away, at moments of high intensity or high violence. And I told them that no, what they should do is just plug their ears, because what you're actually looking at isn't all that crazy. It's if you literally watch the most graphic scene in the world and close your ears or turn off the silent, you just make it mute, it looks like the dumbest thing in the world. It's so amazing.
That's exactly right. And again, too, it's like and I know both you and I have experienced it, and on our own productions and also together on things, but you're talking about sex scenes and stuff like that. We shot a sex scene for exposure, and when you're shooting something like that, it's ridiculous and it's uncomfortable and it's weird, and then
it's not sexy at all.
It's not sexy at all, and I know that you've probably been asked this same kind of ridiculous question, Steve, at some point in your career. It's like, what was it like shooting a sex scene? And like they think that you're gonna be like, oh my God, it was the most erotic thing I was ever a part of. It's like, no, this was the most mechanical, boring, awkward thing that I have ever shot and ever been a part of, because it is. It just is. But again, like you said, when you shoot stuff and you take out that sound element in the edit, it's just like looking at it in those awkward moments when you're filming something and there's just visuals that you're just trying to watch.
Totally. So Nick, back to you. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Not at all. The less is more stuff, I think, translates, Steve, doesn't it translate right back to Hitchcock and the shower scene? You never see a knife, hitting whatever her name was.
Yeah, the knife never touches
it. Correct. And all you see is blood going down the drain. Well, but again, you've got the sound there, the famous sound. So that's really cool, guys. All right, so regarding this prosthetic stuff you were talking about, Jake, I can't remember. I called it the stuff. This thing you can build prosthetics with. Where can you buy it? Is there a professional retail store that you recommend, or do you buy this stuff online? Or
there are a couple places that manufacture like top quality prosthetics, but again, you got to have somebody who knows how to apply them, because there's a technique to it. But RBFX has probably some of the best top of the line prosthetics, pre-made prosthetics you can buy, but they cost a lot. So again, it goes back to budget, knowing what you're going to shoot. If you if your production involves having a character wear a prosthetic, you say you're shooting 10 days, and it's required that 6 out of the 10 days there's got to be a prosthetic. Well, if you go buy a pre-made one, most of those cost a couple $100s for that one piece and that one-time use. So you're going to have to take into account, does it budgetarily make sense to buy 6 sets, or does it make sense to have a makeup artist sculpt and make the molds and spend probably half that cost on the materials and just make as many copies? And if something comes up, you're like, God, we need another day of shooting. He's got the mold. Just pay him, ask him how much it costs to make another one and apply it. So again, it's just one of those things. There's another one called Rubberware. God, I'm going blank. One of the Bermans, not Tom, Rob Berman owns it. And it's a little bit less expensive. He kind of made it more retail-y. I like them a lot. I don't know, depending on what you're wanting to do cinematically, they might not be the best, but they're a lot cheaper. But they're good quality prosthetics. But there's not quite as much of the quality control on them that you would be with RBFX prosthetics. But there's lots of options. And again, it just depends on what you're wanting to do. If it's a scar and a cut, there's obviously other alternatives. If it's like a complete transformation, then yeah, you're gonna, the money's gonna start coming into play in terms of what level and what direction you want to go with.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Are those brick and mortar outlets, or are they online?
Online.
Online. Okay, great.
Yep. I can't remember off the top of my head. I know that RBFX.
I'll find them. Don't worry about it. It's cool. So, any experience with Squibs?
Here's a story about Squibs. You need a pyrotechnician to really do them successfully and safely. Makeup artists don't really typically handle those. That it needs to be somebody that knows about explosives, because essentially that's what you're strapping onto a person.
Because that's the best effect is the explosive effect, I would imagine. The best gore quality or the best shock value, you're going to want the explosive version, right? Is that what you're saying, basically? I don't know.
It depends. I mean, again,
right.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some really successful bullet hits with just compressed air and a tube. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do. Now, if they're running, like if you got, like, say, for example, like, if you're watching like a action movie and there's tons of people and machine guns and people get hit all over and over and over again, yeah, you need a pyrotechnician for that. But if it's like a static shot of somebody, like they're standing there and somebody's holding the gun at them and, they shoot them in the head or whatever, the chest or whatever, you can get away with something that's more prone just off of camera. Compressed air works great.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Like I said, there's lots of alternatives. Squibs, I've never dealt with them. I've actually thought about trying to get a pyrotechnics license, and also too, in my research on that, not every state has the same standards for it. But just for safety's sake, yeah. I mean, essentially what it is to give you an idea of what it is essentially you strap on some sort of padded metal plate with essentially like a black cat or something bigger, and under that strap, that's
like the firework.
Yeah, you just take the wick out, and you're going to have a igniter like for rockets. Like you can go to like Michael's or whatever, and they have rocket kits, and they have the little like wire thing that has a little piece in there that essentially they have it A and B. You clip it onto a battery, and it triggers that. Shoots the rocket. It's the same thing. You just remove the wick from like a black cat, and you stick that metal piece, that metal wire down in there, so that when you have the wires and you touch it to your different spots on the battery, then it pops. But again, not knowing enough about like grades and stuff like that of an explosive, I wouldn't touch it, just for my own, professional integrity, because I don't want to get sued. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. So anything like that, like anything that involves like those kind of things, those are actually, I guess one thing is like in my, what we posted here is special makeup effects. A lot of people call it special effects. Special effects are different. Special effects are squibs, an explosion, stuff like that. Special makeup effects are just that, you know, their makeup, they're special and they're going to affect, you know, the person's face or whatever. But yeah, there's a little bit of a discrepancy, and depending on which makeup artist you talk about, they're like, I don't do special effects, I do special makeup. And
you know, I noticed that wording today. I had not realized it until today that it was worded that way on purpose, but I did guess that earlier because I always say SFX space M/U, right? Special effects makeup.
Yeah.
But until I really read what that was, the title of your talk, I was like, oh, of course that's different, because what Nick did in post with VFX could be considered special effects.
Yeah, it's
right.
Just special visual effects. Yeah.
Right.
And again, that all goes back to the 70s when the special makeup effects arena really started coming to predominance. They always had it, you know, there's always been special makeup effects, but you were just a makeup artist. You know, you go back and look at Lon Chaney, he was just a makeup artist, you know. Yeah, he did manipulative techniques on his face, but they just called it a makeup artist. Same way when Jack Pierce did, you know, Frankenstein, Wolfman, all that stuff. He was just a makeup artist. He was the company makeup artist that did all the makeup. I mean, and the thing is, like, Jack Pierce gets acknowledged for Frankenstein and the Wolfman stuff, but he was a consummate cosmetic artist. I mean, he did everybody, you know, eyebrows, women's makeup, hair, everything. And it really wasn't until, you know, Planet of the Apes was kind of the first one that kind of like elevated it. Everybody's like, holy crap, look what they can do. And then the 70s came in and you started looking at like what Dick Smith was doing with The Exorcist and The Godfather. And, you know, I know that there was a big conversation history-wise in the 70s about what the hell do we call this? You know, because it's not makeup and it's not a special effect, you know, so, but the consensus seems to be special makeup effects, because we are doing makeup and we're also, it's just a special version of it, and we're also trying to get an effect out of it instead of, you know, a special effect which would involve something other than actors and makeup.
Totally. On that note, I'm going to try to remember, I need to change the wording in the credits for our movie. Because I think I had it the other way.
Yeah, and again, it's just like, and I don't even think about half the time. I've just gotten into, you know, saying it, but yeah, I mean, it is just, you know, it's something that, and the reason I say that is because in the industry itself, like if you go up to makeup effects artist, you know, special makeup effects artist, and they're like, oh, you're special effects, they'll go, no, we're not special effects. That department's over there. They're the ones that are about to blow up this car.
Right, exactly.
That's who special effects are. And again, it's just something that you just kind of rattle off your tongue, but technically the true moniker of it is special makeup effects. So, but yeah, I mean, hopefully that answers your question on the squibs, Nick. Like I said, I've thought about dabbling in it, just because it'd be another straw in my hat, or feather in my hat. Feather in my hat is something that I could offer, but also there's a lot of insurance policies you have to do them. But again, like anything, just take a look at what you're wanting to do and see if there's an alternative, because like I said, I've had great success with blood bladders and whatnot. So
right, yeah, there's a ton of YouTube hillbilly do-it-yourself squib videos out there.
Yeah, and that's another thing I do.
Don't quite cut it, you know.
Yeah. And that's another thing I do tell even people who are wanting to get into it, because I do get approached a lot about, you know, younger people are like, oh, you know, I really want to be a makeup artist and this, that, and the other. And I've been watching YouTube, and I'm like, don't watch YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah. YouTube, anybody can post anything. And there's one that we, you know, I and all my, you know, friends in the industry occasionally it goes around and it's this video of some dumbass art teacher doing a plaster life cast of this kid, and you can't get it off.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
What happened?
they finally got it off, but he didn't release it. And you can do it, but I would not ever. But yeah, they eventually got it off, but his skin was just completely burnt up because there's a chemical reaction with that plaster. It heats up.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
And his eyebrows were gone, eyelashes were gone, so it's stuff like that. When people are like, hey, how do you do life cast? And I was like, well, first of all, don't do one unless you have somebody who knows how to do it. But they're one that you might take a look at, Nick, which is something you could probably convert into anything. I've used it for a couple different gags. His name was Mike Mekash, Mekash, and his wife is Erin Kruger Mekash, who has been the head of the makeup department for the American Horror Story series, and is kind of Ryan Murphy's go-to special makeup and makeup effects artist. He did a little tutorial on how to make a little blood bladder that you can use to translate into a bullet hit. I've used it, it glues down. Again, there'll still be a prosthetic involved, but if you're just putting it under a shirt or something, it should be sufficient. But again, it's just air powered, you just air behind it.
Yeah, cool. I appreciate that reference. Thank you. So I just have to know, since you mentioned it earlier in passing, I was a big fan of Face Off. My favorite part of the show were actually the judges that would come up and say, "What were you thinking?" Or something even worse. And what's the truth behind that? What they were doing there? You're saying it's not what it appeared to be?
Oh no. Well, okay, so you've seen the show. So
yeah.
In the show, they're like, okay, these artists have this challenge and they only have 3 days to do this, blah, blah, blah. So that was basically the premise of the show. So you always saw them like, okay, pick your model, and they'd run over and get the life casts. Okay, they didn't do the life casts. They're already there. So essentially, and I almost got on the show. This is how I know a lot of it, because I've read their contract. But essentially what they would do is they didn't have to do any life casting. The only thing that they were meant to do on that show was to show them sculpting and applying, because that's the interesting part of the industry. The life casting part is not interesting. The mold making part is not interesting. It doesn't make for good television. So they cut those parts out. So you ever wonder what happens between, hey, we've met our deadline, we have to stop sculpting, and then miraculously the next day they have prosthetics that they have to take out of molds and they have to go apply it that day. It's because they never shot them in sequence. Like each challenge was like day one, okay, here, pick your sculpt. You have a day to sculpt. Okay, great. Now we're going to hand this off to the mold makers, who will spend a week getting these molds and everything, and all the foam runners, and get all this stuff ready for you while we go on to the next challenge. So the way they edited it was that they basically did all the first day challenges up front, and then the next week, after all the stuff was run, then they would come back in and then they do their looks. They would have to do their applications and stuff. So they cut out all of the difficult parts of it and glossed over it and made it look like it was really simple. Anybody could do it. And then in terms of the judges, not one of those judges' opinions, for the most part, was theirs. They all had earpieces and they're all being told what to say. The productions already knew who was going to win.
By whom? Who are they being told by?
The directors and the producers.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were meant to say certain things. And not only that, but, I think I mentioned it briefly, but no makeup artist can do that in that amount of time. I couldn't. I don't know anybody who could. And they would always stack them up too. I don't know if when you watch the show, they would pull people who were predominant in the industry. A few of my friends were on it. Rod Maxwell, he was on the show. He's a brilliant makeup effects artist. He he was on the show, but then they would find people like these haunters who are like, oh, they kind of know how to do this stuff, so they could vote them off quickly.
Mm.
They wanted to have a lot of people so they could vote them off. It was good television. And the problem with Face Off is that it stopped focusing. It started off great, and I watched it, but it started this trend of making a makeup effects artist as celebrity. But I want to be a special makeup effects artist because I want to be famous. I want to be on TV. I want to go to conventions and have people awe and fawn over me the whole time, which is exactly what most of the people on that show wound up doing. Is they're not working in the industry. They're figureheads that go around and touring horror conventions and whatnot, fantasy conventions, because they're on TV.
Right.
Also, too, the only judge that they had on the show that actually had like decent integrity is V. Neal. She actually won Academy Awards, but even V let it go to her head because she kind of got, I've met V a couple times and she's still brilliant. But
Who was that goth guy that was like sitting right next to her?
Yeah,
Was he anybody? I don't know.
Well, here I can't remember his name. Glenn Hetrick. So from what I understand, they're like, oh, Glenn Hetrick of Optic Nerve and blah, blah, blah. Now, keep in mind that Optic Nerve was originally founded by two other guys, and they sold it. And so he bought it, and he got credit for all the stuff they did in their earlier years because it was still the same company. I remember a joke that was told to me. It wasn't a joke, but this is something that happened. I believe I correctly remember this, and I think it was they might have even posted on social media or something like that. But Rick Baker had made jokes about Glenn Hetrick, like, who's this guy? How do you fit in those pants? How do you fit in those pants?
Very funny.
And stuff like that. So again, that's when I first started this talk, is like, do a little research, because there are a lot of people who will be like, oh, I worked on, I'm trying to think of something. I worked on Star Wars. Well, what did you do on Star Wars? Well, I painted the fingernails on this one arm.
There were 350 other people who also did that job on Star Wars.
But yeah, exactly. And so that's what a lot of it happens is that, that's happened numerous times in the industry. They'll open up a shop because they've worked for this one company, and literally sometimes they freaking are the guy who cleans up. But because they worked there, they'd be like, oh, I work for this company, and look, in my lobby, all the movie posters of the films I've worked on. You didn't work on them. You just worked for the company that worked on them, but you're trying to use that to get work. And it's not until they get on set, like I'd mentioned before, I get on set and you're like, these assholes don't know what they're doing.
Right.
You wonder where the special effects really end then, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is like, don't get me wrong. Here's the thing, is that basically with the special effects, and again, these people may be really great. There's a lot of people who think they're really great and they're not. I don't think I'm great. I think I'm sufficient, and I'm always looking to try and be great. A lot of makeup artists are very humble. They're always willing to learn new techniques, new materials. They want to better themselves because it only betters the industry. And most of those people are people who were students of Dick Smith, which I was one of them. I started his program right before he had passed away. And his belief is that we only better our art and our industry is if we support one another and we learn and continuously learn to better what we do. And so that's kind of the approach I've always looked at it, and I stayed humble and know where my skill levels are at, and and where I want to achieve on the next project to better and learn from. But there's some people who are just they want the celebrity. They want that fame, that fortune. But the kind of the approach that Rick Baker and Stan Winston took in the 80s was Stan Winston, when he had his company, he didn't do anything. He was a good makeup artist, But when he started his company, he rarely did anything. He just hired the best people. The same way with Rick. Rick still doing makeup, still sculpting, all that stuff, but he knew that no one man can do all this stuff. So he hired the best people. So that's what you kind of got to go on a scavenger hunt sometimes and find out who these people have worked with before. You know, like anything, look at the resume, look at who they worked with before, get a hold of that people and talk to them, see what hey, how were they on set? You know, were they punctual? Were they time? Did they take into sense timing and all that stuff? Were they communicative and stuff like that? So, word of mouth gets around. If it's somebody who's terrible, then that will get around. And if there's somebody who really tries to be a team player and wants to make something great, that gets around too. And that's, kind of how I keep getting work, is like, I always try to give it 110% every time I work on a project, no matter if it's doing a beauty makeup or doing hair. Sometimes I have to do, making a prosthetic, and again, that's something that I might bring up that Steve and I, we kind of, I guess he mutually discovered on this last production was, I'd always, I do makeup effects, but I also know how to do makeup. And when we originally started talking about the project, Steve was like, yeah, well, we'll just need you to come up for a couple days to do this, and this. And then I think I was like, well, I don't know if I told you or we had a conversation, but essentially Steve's like, well, you know how to do makeup though, don't you? And I was like, yeah. I was like, well, then we'll just have you up here the whole time, because I can manage that whole department, whether it's the effects or the regular makeup. And
Right.
We had to do corrective makeup every day in some way, shape, or form. And also too, I know my way around a set, and if something needed to be done, I could go grab it. And,
Well, yeah, you were also first AD for a few days.
Yeah. So, and again, I love movies. I love making movies. It's not that I'm just a makeup effects artist. So I easily can slip into whatever role I need to be in, given the project, because low budget films are kind of like that. And I know how to communicate with the director, the producer, and everybody else, because I've kind of been all those roles at one point in time. And I think that's important for a makeup effects artist that you're going to potentially work with, is that, do they know set etiquette? Do they know how to communicate what they're doing to the other departments? Because if they can't, then you're going to get those 4 or 5 hours of setup time and very little to show for it. I don't know, Steve, after the 2 projects we've worked on, I got little bits and pieces that we filmed for some of the in-betweens on Helltown. I try to work pretty quickly in making sure that stuff on set. So I'm very cognizant of time management and the overall production, and not just my department, because there's some makeup.
Yeah, and even if something that took a long time, I was prepared for it.
Yeah,
I knew to say, this is going to take 6 hours for Jake to do this, so we better go and do XYZ meanwhile, because we can still be working. We're about up from time, and I don't know whether Zoom just kicks us off or they keep going, but I think it's a good time to wrap it up. Jake, thank you very much for visiting with us today. Stephanie, Nick, any final last things for him?
No, thank you so much. I mean, if you had a recommendation for a video about, just changing people's faces, like adding a nose or a color of skin, if there's, I think you were recommending like some people to go watch online.
Yeah. Oh, I'll get you. I don't know, Steve's probably got you guys' contact information. I'll write up something,
Okay.
like links, books, just so you can kind of get acclimated on the universe of what all this entails. Because I'm a big film and makeup historian, so I like to know if there's a new book. I'll read it about it and see if I can name something from it. But I'll create kind of a little follow-up document for you guys, so that you'll have some paths to getting some more answers, and also just learning a little bit more about the craft too.
Okay. Thanks so much, Jake. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, Jake. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate your time. Learned a lot. Got some inspiration as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad. Thank you so much, Steve, for allowing me to come on here. It was great. And I'm glad that you guys got a lot out of it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will post that. Whatever he sends me, I'll post on the meetup group. So
Okay.
have
cool.
a wonderful
Thanks,
rest
Steve.
of your have a great weekend, you guys.
Okay.
Yeah,
You too.